Hi everyone, it's Ruckus live from Concern Ventures office. Today I have Tove with me, joining us from Stockholm. Hello, Tove.
Hi.
Super happy to have you here for this hour today. We're going to do the typical 40-minute questions to run through your background, career, your firm, and as well as just some of your thoughts about the market. So for people who are dialing in today and tuning in, Tove is an investment manager at Norrsken VC, one of the newer and actually, as far as I learned, the biggest impact investor now in Europe. So hello, Tove.
Hi.
So I wanna kick it off as all the interviews we start with a short background of you. You know, how did you find yourself as an investor in clean tech? So your background spanned from private equity as well as you worked in multiple transaction TMT sector broadly in London. And so what made you to come back to Sweden and join Norskin and focus more on sustainability as a topic?
Well, I mean, I come from a quite traditional finance background. I studied business and economics, started working in London, first at PwC within tech, media and telecom, like you mentioned, getting ACA qualified and also specializing primarily in deals advisory and valuations. Of course, TMT is such a broad range, so you look at everything from pre-revenue tech startups all the way through to your global telecom giants and the media conglomerates. But I always found myself more interested and appealed to the kind of really early stage tech companies. And I worked closely with a Silicon Valley partner who had the mission of setting up a new subdivision that was focused purely on helping early stage startups with everything from valuations to strategy to capital raising, which was kind of set off my interest in the really early stage businesses. At the same time, I had some clients that were large industrial companies, mining companies, etc., that had portfolios of clean tech startups. And I was always amazed by the complexity of the solutions. And when I compared it to some of the other more kind of entertainment clients that I had, or media clients, I remember just feeling blown away by how tangible the impact would be if they succeeded, and the real dent that you can really do in the world. So I moved away from the advisor side onto the buy side, and joined a buy and build PE firm called Marwin Capital. That structure was also working very closely with management teams that I loved, but it was much later stage businesses that we were investing in, and a lot more focus on, smart business structuring, planning, more trying to find a good deal without overpaying, but less focus on this groundbreaking new technologies that I loved. So when it comes to the sustainability angle, it's always been very close to my heart. I come from a very sustainability focused family, and haven't eaten meat for 20 years and the rest.
Wow.
And so for me, it was always natural that at some point I wanted to work with sustainability, but I struggled to combine my experience to date, and that I really enjoyed working with investments, with a career trajectory that didn't necessarily kind of include just working at a charity. I still really loved the business angle and building businesses and helping them succeed. So at one point when I was working with Buy and Build PE in London, we're working a lot with trying to acquire chemical assets and chemical carve-out assets. And I remember I just felt that it was so far off what I really wanted to do, which was sustainability. And at the same time, kind of the stars were aligned, and Norrsken Foundation was then looking for an investment manager for the first time since the fund actually started 2-3 years earlier. So it was kind of the stars were aligned. I got the opportunity to combine my investment experience with tech angle and
The breaking point.
Yeah, it really was. It was almost too good to be true. So I joined what was then a 25 million euro fund in a non-profit foundation. And it was funny because I spoke to one of the GPs yesterday, and we were laughing at it because when I joined, I think it was my second week, she mentioned to me, she's like, "Oh yeah, so we're thinking about maybe raising a bigger fund, but it probably won't be quick. It will take a lot of time. I mean, it might not even happen. And well, it's been quite a year.
So amazing. So now moving in from you came back to Sweden and you mentioned and you touched briefly upon Norrsken Foundation. So I think Norrsken is something that is probably was quite known in Sweden, but now established as one of the biggest impact funds across Europe. So fast forward to this crazy year probably you had. Could you elaborate more how it all started from like a bit of a background history for people that are tuning in and want to learn more? So I know that Norrsken Foundation was founded by Nicholas, who is one of the founders of Klarna, and maybe how this whole thing evolved. And you run a co-working space, so you're quite a platform. You can probably even say that, right?
Absolutely.
And now the new fund is sort of a cherry on the top. That is probably not a smallest one.
No, absolutely. So you're completely right. Norrsken Foundation was started in early 2017 by Niklas Adelbert, who one of the co-founders of fintech unicorn Klarna. And he was incredibly successful, as you know, with Klarna, but felt that he really wanted to focus more on the mission to create a world optimized for people and planet. So he left Klarna and he set out to invest kind of his time, experience, and capital to launch this non-profit foundation called Norrsken, which initially was a co-working space or an impact ecosystem, which is here in downtown Stockholm. And it's focusing really on combining the power of tech and entrepreneurship to maximize impact. So it started off as a co-working space in this old tram station, which is great. Anybody who's in Stockholm should come by and visit. And today, Norrsken has grown to be partly an impact co-working space that we have in Stockholm, which has 450 members from 120 different startups, which provides more than just a co-working space. It's also it's of course the physical infrastructure, but also the network, the partnerships, and the collective knowledge required to succeed. We've actually acquired an old school in Kigali in Rwanda, which will be our next hub to open up.
Oh wow.
So we're going through the renovation work there and hoping to open up as soon as possible. And we're hoping to open up more of these kind of impact ecosystem hubs globally. The second part of Norrsken today is kind of the PR awareness aspect, where we host a lot of events, external events like Impact Week, which was a 4-day event last year with over 4,000 visitors, which this year, COVID-19 allowing, we're hoping will be even bigger. And it's all around putting the spotlight on the impact entrepreneur and kind of making the impact entrepreneur the new rock star, because we feel like we require some successful role models as well to encourage more young graduates to enter into the world of impact, but also more capital to flow into impact. And the third part in the Norrsken kind of machine is then the VC fund, which started in September 17. By 4 investors who really took a chance on us, a huge bet on us, which are, of course, Niklas himself, but also one of the founders of King, so Sebastian Knutsson, the founder of Daniel Wellington, the watch brand.
Oh, wow.
And one of the founders of Mojang as well, Carl Manne.
So all entrepreneurs.
Yeah, all entrepreneurs who really bet on us to start with this fund, which was almost like a proof of concept fund for us, to assess whether there was even enough deal flow and if our investment thesis held. So we started with a quite broad mandate across all 17 sustainable development goals. And we've so far screened more than 1,600 companies. We've invested in 21 of these, and we've kind of improved our own and streamlined our own strategy internally. And then, like I mentioned, about a year ago, we started fundraising and leveling up because we realized that actually this works. There's a fantastic, strong momentum and strong deal flow. And like anybody in investments know that, you're only ever as good as your deal flow is.
Yeah.
So we've leveled up we just announced 2 days ago that we've had our second close of our new fund. So we're aiming for a €100 million fund. We're now up in 91 million, so we're almost there. And what's so exciting is that in addition to these initial 4 investors, we've managed to get some fantastic LPs. So we have the ones that are public are Some Invest, who's our biggest LP, with which is the Swedish state-backed kind of fund of fund investment arm. European Investment Fund, which is to say similar but on the European side, is our second largest. And then we have, of course, Norrsken Foundation. We have also the banks, Nordea and SEB, and the H&M family.
Yeah.
Transfer Invest as well. So it's incredibly exciting to us, because one of our big theses as well, in addition to directly investing in impact startups, is also to prove to other investors that you can invest in impact companies and still generate market returns, because our new fund is a pure commercial fund. So now we have to we've talked the talk, now we have to walk the walk as well.
Amazing. Congratulations. I think this is a great success for obviously your team, but as well as for a broader ecosystem. I think there's not that many funds in Europe specifically. I think US is way more advanced on that end, but I think we definitely need more players in this space that are active, and and congratulations on a great roster of investors as well. So maybe drilling down more to Norrsken VC, I think we spoke to a bunch of different people for these Let's Talk Energy sessions. I think you're quite unique, and I'm very happy that for first we actually have a woman on the panel, because I was getting very depressed speaking to all the guys. It seems like it's very much still male-driven industry, but basically, I think could you elaborate a bit more about Norrsken VC and your current new fund? What do you guys focus? How big of the team? What's the geographical focus? And then we'll drill down a bit more into what you focus, because it's not just energy and e-mobility. You focus on as you mentioned, sustainable development goals, and you actually focus on all of them. So
yeah, absolutely. So our kind of initial focus when the fund started was, like I mentioned, the impact companies that have to tick one of the 17 sustainable development goals, which is essentially covering almost everything in this world, using tech as both as a tool for innovation, but also as a tool for scale. We focused primarily on software solutions in the beginning, but we realized pretty quickly that in order to make a real dent in the world, we really need to increase our mandate to also include hardware. So we started also investing then in hardware last year, and have done a few investments. I think our first investment was into Heart Aerospace. So it's building electric airplanes. So very
wow. Starting with the tough one.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. We were talking about that, saying it's really setting the bar quite high. But our primary focus is in the Nordics. We have a European mandate as well, slightly smaller than the Nordics mandate, but we have, for something that is super exciting, we can invest outside of Europe, and even outside of Europe as well. And we focus at seed to Series A stage. Our average first ticket tends to be between half a million euro up to €3 million as a first ticket, but we can follow the kind of winners pool companies up to about 5 to 10% of the fund size. And although we're not kind of energy focused as such, our fund deal flow has consistently, since we started, been about around 30 to 40% environment focused, and that's consisting then of course of both energy, but also other type of solutions that are positive for the environment, such as solutions tackling food waste, for example, and such.
So how big is the team? And you guys, as I understand, all the team is based in Stockholm, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We're all based in Stockholm, and we've just increased, because we now closed the fund, we've also been able to level up in terms of team size. So we're now 4 GPs, 2 IMs, and 2 investment analysts.
Okay. And so from a strategy perspective, you mentioned, you're kind of looking broadly, right? So from your initial 21 investments that you've done, what you call this first fund, that kind of spanned from very different things, right? You have biotechnology companies, you have really some interesting energy companies, autonomous driving company in Ryan you have as well in your portfolio. So what's kind of the focus next? Is it mostly, again, you have some hardware and software companies. Do you focus, you would say, on both the hardware and software, hardware-enabled software?
Mm.
Um,
I'd say we have a very broad mandate. We don't necessarily want to pigeonhole ourselves too much, because what we really believe in is finding the best entrepreneurs with fantastic solutions. I mean, like I'm sure you know yourself as an investor, quite
yeah,
often a pitch deck ends up at my desk and I didn't even know that that type of solution existed. So in a
yeah,
sense,
absolutely.
it's more a matter of focusing on the entrepreneur, and then assessing the solution. Of course, we do as well some deep dives into particular verticals, but we don't want to niche ourselves too narrow. Rather, we look at the solution, and what we assess is the impact potential. So really around the market and the scalability. And when you look at the market, it's both from the financial perspective and the impact perspective, because we really focus on businesses which have business models where impact and profit go hand in hand. So for each unit of profit, the company is generating 1 unit of impact is generated as a result. So you cannot switch off the impact, if like.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of our core focus, is looking at those type of business models that we have the really outstanding entrepreneurs, and then of course that the product is exceptional, and that you have a really strong customer value proposition, and ideally a customer value proposition that is not just impact, but ideally say cost savings that might be driving it. And because it is 1-to-1 impact profit ratio, you will automatically generate impact as you grow and as you scale.
So this is very interesting. I think you partially answered the question that I wanted to ask. What you personally and what you as Norse can look in for entrepreneurs or companies when you look at them. And you mentioned multiple times, entrepreneur is very important.
Mm.
And you also touched briefly upon this, impact measurement, which is
Mm.
a very, very interesting topic that I think I didn't have the ability to ask other people that I spoke to through these one-on-ones. And this is something very novel and new. I think there's not really a predetermined methodology. People do look through different lenses. A lot of them use the simplified version of ESG, right?
Mm.
But you're way beyond ESG. ESG just stands for 3 things that I would say anyone can kind of,
Mm.
say that they do. But the reality is, like, impact is a way, way bigger word than just ESG. So could you elaborate a bit more? And that's very, very interesting for myself, and I'm sure for other people that are watching. How do you understand this 1-for-1 impact measurement? Is this something that you create as a KPI internally for the fund, for the portfolio, for the teams? Is it standardized, customized?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really interesting question. And it's a question that we receive a lot, not just from startups, also different investors. And
Yeah.
even within the impact industry, I mean, if you're going to various different events, it's always impact measurement. It's always one of the hottest topics, mainly because, just like you're saying, there's not a standardized tool. There are loads of different theories. We focus often on more on kind of the theory of change, identifying the long-term impact and the short-term indicators, and developing KPIs in that sense. But I can elaborate a little bit on how we work with the startups. I mean, firstly, it's unless the impact is intentional and measurable, we wouldn't consider it to be an impact company. So it can't be, an afterthought, or sometimes if companies are struggling to measure it, then, we question whether is it actually an impact business? Because if it is an impact business, quite often
Yeah.
sure, you have to think about it, but there's always a way to measure the impact that you're
Mm.
generating. So what we always do, we always assess the impact throughout our due diligence process, from the very first meeting all the way through. we don't require necessarily that the companies are already measuring it, but when we are investing, we do include in our term sheet and in the agreements that in addition to the typical financial KPIs, the company will also report to us on the impact KPIs. In order for them to do that, of course, we help them as soon as we've invested. We tend to hold an impact workshop where we, together with the founders,
post-investment, you mean, right? So once you kind of invest in the company.
So in the when we invest, we do the internal work ourselves, which is slightly challenging at times, especially now when we have new LPs on board, putting even stricter requirements, which we absolutely love. So one of them, for example, is that which was quite scary at first, I'm not gonna lie, but we love it, is that our team's carry pool is actually, sort of carried interest is actually not just linked to financial performance, but also for our portfolio to achieve the impact targets which we set at the time of investing.
Oh wow. That's definitely something of a novel thing that it's the first time I'm hearing it.
Yeah, and we love it in a sense because it is fully our theory and thesis. And
so not only you have an ARR, you also have an impact measure that is attached to it.
Yeah, which means that we need to be able to tie the financial forecast to, because we believe in this profit and impact going hand in hand, we need to come up with a way of measuring the impact as the business scales in a financial forecast as well. So we do quite a lot of work ourselves internally, and of course it gets easier and easier for each investment. I mean, when you've looked at one food waste company or a company tackling food waste, then I mean, we've done 4 now, so the latter 3 were significantly easier. But so we do develop these KPIs, but the entrepreneurs, they essentially agree that they will report to us with these impact KPIs and some other kind of sustainability standards as well. At the point of investment, we set these targets alongside with our LPs and the company, of course, and then we host this workshop together with the entrepreneur when we really nail down which are the key KPIs. And that's not just for us. We also see that it's a significant strength when it comes to everything from capital raising, from recruitment, even in customer communications. So we really see that there's a strong momentum, but also a strong demand for these type of metrics. And I mean, to go back to your initial question, is I think as long as you start measuring somewhere, of course it'll be iterated throughout the way. But I think that applies to both the startups and us as investors. As long as we start measuring, that's the really good start. I'm hoping personally that fast forward 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that it will be included in any company's annual report, financial statement. But that's slightly further ahead, but we have to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I think this is already on the way. It's really a question of whether that's some of the companies are doing that for value that it adds to the equity if it's a publicly listed companies, and that becomes a bit of a greenwashing rather than like direct or indirect need or wanting to actually do it. And kind of just to maybe could you share like an example of the portfolio, one of the portfolio companies that you work of an example KPI that you would implement?
Yeah, I mean, the really the easiest ones to get your head around, I think, are, for example, going back to food waste, is that for each unit of food that you have saved, you can convert that into CO2 emissions or savings. Or, for example, you mentioned Enride earlier. I mean, there are so many different metrics you could apply for a business like that, but CO2 emissions is the kind of, for me at least, the most natural one, which you can quite easily calculate, because you can see how many diesel trucks are you replacing with electric trucks and what does that result in. Of course, there will be a few key assumptions along the way, but I think particularly when you're looking at CO2 reducing companies, it's far more tangible than perhaps education or health tech.
So I always ask, and I don't want to be picky on the companies because it's really hard to to pick on them. The question is always goes as what's your favorite company portfolio, but I tend to move down the line and say what's the more interesting. And I think you have to you can choose for quite a lot of ones. Which particular subsector of where you guys focus is the most exciting for you? I think in a wake of COVID, you guys focus on biotechnology, healthcare, right? This is quite obviously an urgent space that maybe I wouldn't say was overlooked, but maybe underestimated the importance of it in a bigger scale. What personally is most exciting you? And I know you look at energy companies as you mentioned previously. What would you identify as the topics that that something is most exciting for you and from the companies that you've seen recently?
So that we've invested in, or in general?
It's your choice to choose whether you're picking on something that you've done or you think you're looking at the moment, for example.
Okay.
Both works both ways. You mentioned both.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it's of course really hard to choose in your portfolio which one is your favorite, but I can say more thematically on what fits best in this form is companies that I think are quite exciting are the ones where this they're quite binary, of course. So from an investment perspective, they're riskier, but the ones where there's significant disruption in an industry if they succeed. So for example, we've already mentioned Heart Aerospace, and they're trying to transform the aviation industry and make all short distance flights electric. And that's just fantastic. I love following their quarterly updates on, now they're at this point with the motor and this point with all these different parts. But I think it's fantastic if they succeed. Same with Einride that we mentioned, in intelligent freight mobility solutions for both shippers and carriers, where you're completely disrupting the existing supply chain, which is really driving the electrification and accelerating it. But what's so fascinating with Einride is that they really focus on the business model side. So if I'm offering a company to cut costs and going fully electric and reducing emissions, it's such a no-brainer. And then, of course, the autonomous driving will come in at a later point. But I think those two are really interesting in the sense of the disruption value if they succeed. Another one that I wanted to raise is kind of more on the software side. We've invested in a company called Climate View, which is a really interesting example of a software solution which is addressing climate change from more of a top-down perspective. So it's a digital solution that helps government bodies and the like to map out and visualize the targets, their ongoing initiatives and the status, and not necessarily holding them accountable, but it's a tool that helps governments and other stakeholders to collaborate and be more efficient and focus on the right climate actions. So actually helping us all to have increasing the chances of reaching reduced CO2 targets.
And I think more broadly, I think I'll not pick specifically on more like healthcare, but like speaking about energy space particularly, I think it's quite interesting because there's a lot of new funds popping in. I think this became a sector. I think sustainability as per se as well became a topic of the last couple of years, and more so energy has been, there's $1 out of $3 is coming up from corporate venture capital. Obviously there's every day you see more and bigger and new funds focusing specifically on the kind of energy and climate issue. And then also there's generalists more moving past the stigmas of 2000 of clean tech 1.0 to now understanding that the time is really right, and there's again great loads of new companies powered by more software rather than hardware in this space. What do you think Norrsken as a new fund, as a new brand in among other funds is going to be different from other funds? What's going to be your USP coming to the entrepreneurs more so?
It's a really good question, and I think firstly, I don't think VCs should overestimate their own worth. Ultimately, there's so many fantastic VCs out there, and ultimately it's the entrepreneurs. The success is really down to them. But if I had to mention where I think we might stand out from other investors in this space is, firstly, the most obvious, we're not an energy expert, and we won't say that we are either. What we can bring, however, is this impact focus that we discussed about, which we've seen is really a strength for these businesses. But also, we have so far managed to build a really strong brand, particularly in Sweden and in the Nordics. We use our brand as often as we possibly can to lift and highlight entrepreneurs and startups. We also have a really strong reach and a network, and good backing from entrepreneurial investors and institutional. I think one of my favorite example of this is a very random anecdote, but when the president of the Republic of Korea, Moon Jae-in, came to Sweden for a state visit to visit our King Carl Gustaf XVI, we were actually asked to host an event at Norrsken Foundation, in which both Korean and Swedish companies presented their solutions to tackle some of these huge social challenges. And so we included 5 of our portfolio companies. They flew in 5 of their companies, and it was really funny because it was coincided with the Large Brilliant Minds event that's founded by Spotify's Daniel Ek. So one of the guests of Brilliant Minds was Naomi Campbell, who stopped by briefly.
Oh, wow.
So I never thought I'd say that, I was in the same room as South Korea's president, King Carl Gustaf XVI, and Naomi Campbell, but
quite a crowd.
Exactly. But in addition to being a fun anecdote, we have seen that our brand and this kind of awareness about, and our mission about increasing the visibility for impact companies really helps increase business opportunities, recruitments, and investments. So when it comes to fundraising, so I think if I had to single it out to one thing that highlights us and makes us slightly different, I would definitely say that it's that kind of strong brand, which we hopefully will continue building as we scale.
And this is actually an amazing point, and I totally agree, and I deeply believe ourselves building a firm in the same manner, because I believe that among the amount of money that there is in the industry, VCs tend to forget that and take it for granted that at the end they're building as well a company and a brand and a perception of how you're perceived in the market and team and various things, right? I mean, obviously it's easy when you're Sequoia and you have 50, 60 years of past track record, and obviously based maybe in places where you're a household name. But I think in Europe we're still seeing, and I think Sweden is doing a really great job, and Nicholas Zenstrom with Atomico and then more like a generalist field, and EQT. I mean, you guys been kind of killing it from that respect, and I think you're surrounded by great talent and I think great vision more so. I think that's why I think there's more and more funds coming from Scandinavia more recently, because that you have to eventually become a product as well in a way, because you attract great talent in that way. So really agreeing to your point, and I think you definitely are building. I love your website, a new kind of brand. It looks like it looks like something cool, and you want to be part of it.
Well, I'm happy. I hope everybody else feels the same as watching.
and sort of going more deeper to I think this is how, when you go to meet entrepreneurs and why they found you, right? Then going past more when you invest in them, how do you want to work with them? What's the kind of standard? I mean, you're obviously still a young firm, but you have someone like successful entrepreneurs. Again, on LP side, you have successful entrepreneurs. What's the kind of modus operandi that you kind of yourself as investors apply post investment, and what you try to help these companies with?
It really depends a little bit. I mean, in our fund,
I know there's never one answer to that question.
Exactly. Well, in our fund, we're aiming to, in our first fund, we really never took the lead investor role. So of course, then you become a little bit more of a passive investor, helping on whatever specific needs the particular entrepreneurs might need. But we weren't necessarily sitting in boards, and we actually rarely sit in boards ourselves, even if we have a board seat, what we prefer to do is to look at the company and see, okay, who do they need? What kind of skills do they need? And we have a strong network, and we often tap into that, especially when it comes to adding board seats, board representatives. But I think in general, when it comes to the companies where in our new fund, we will take the lead in about half of the deals that we do, and half of the deals will be co-investing with other investors. And I think, of course, in the ones where we take a lead, we will be way more active and help and assist the companies with exactly what they want. But what we found as well is that a lot of entrepreneurs are they're business builders. They don't necessarily want an investor to come in and tell them what to do. It's more perhaps asking the right questions and ensuring that they end up on the right path. But in the end of the day, it's the entrepreneur's company. They do it way better than we do. We can come with help on when they need it. But where we've historically helped most is on recruitment. And especially when it comes to, we're quite passionate about diversity in boardrooms. So I think we've placed in 8 of our portfolio companies, we've helped place a female board member, which we're really, really proud of. And then, so it's really around the kind of marketing, the PR, and the recruitment where we've helped with those. But then everything else, of course, on the kind of an ad hoc basis. And now during COVID-19, I mean, we've been reaching out to all our companies to kind of see if there's anything we can help with and assist with. But I think it's equally a matter of being agile as an investor as well, and being adapting based on the entrepreneur's needs and the stage. Because if we invest really early, they will need significantly more of our time and help than if we invest in, say, a Series A company that has 70 employees. So it really is on a case-by-case basis, but we do help a lot with the impacts, because that's something that I think is so important for our companies. And like you highlighted as well, there's an ocean of information out there, but nobody really knows how to dismantle it and make it into something practical. So that's where I'd say we spend most of the time with the companies.
Okay, thanks. So moving a bit to more about the market and in general questions. So what do you think are the key 3 trends that are going to be mostly important over the next 5 years? Given that you raised a fund recently, you're kind of doing the final close. Where does your focus lie? I mean, this is obviously, again, a very broad question. You can mention technology specifically, or some sort of a subsector, or anything that pops to your head. Maybe narrow it down to more like energy. I think we're trying to kind of be energy or e-mobility, specifically as part of the sustainable energy transition that we're going from last 100 years of oil to now next probably 100 years of electron and power market.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many fascinating trends that are going on in the space, and it will be, I can't wait to see what will actually happen in the next kind of until 2030. But I think some trends that we see a lot is around, of course, smart mobility and smart buildings, around energy storage solutions, so either batteries or battery management softwares and grid balance, all about making the system more reliable and flexible. And in order to, if you can't fully focus on perhaps nuclear, then you really need batteries and you need more energy storage, especially with the increasing energy demand. But I think as well on the kind of from the software side as well, we see a lot on increasing energy efficiency and reducing emissions. So both from the customer perspective, so driving consumer behavior, circular economy, also increasing energy efficiency in homes, and some non-utility players entering the power space using data digitization, which is incredibly interesting. And also more in the traditional kind of B2B solutions as well, where you have business model and supply chain innovations, like I mentioned with Enride, offering transport as a service, those types of solutions, and digitization of slow-moving industries like shipping and freight. Those are quite a lot of themes, but I think it's interesting different angles to the energy space.
No, definitely. I think you can probably find anything. I think, and energy efficiency, whether that's more broadly or more specific. to the transition that is happening from infrastructure side, from like renewable rise, and you mentioned batteries and hydrogen, one of the other topics. Moving into more like of the reality of today, you know, like we had this one of the biggest pandemics. This is something not foreseen or had in their worst nightmare. And then we had some very interesting developments in the energy sector with like supply and demand shock happening in oil, reaching a negative price. I think obviously you have very little in, you know, regards to oil, but how do you think this whole kind of conundrum that happened over the last couple of months, maybe the last quarter, what kind of effect is going to have on the sustainable energy transition and more broadly on impact? Do you think it accelerates it, maybe slows it a bit down, puts a different focus to a health, for example, sector? What's your take on that personally?
I mean, that is the $1 million question that everybody is debating, and I think there's a lot of things talking for. Of course, you mentioned, for example, health. What we've seen is that there has been slightly, just looking at our deal flow, there has been slightly more health solutions, of course. But as an investor, at least, I mean, you're looking at it more on a longer term scale, and we haven't seen a reduction in environmental startups applying. It's just been that it's been an increase in terms of health and digital education tools, for example. But I think in general, the positives has been that we are obviously capable of reducing emissions fast if we want to, but it required a pandemic. So yeah, we can now see that it's possible, but it requires quite huge and drastic actions and an economic hits. But what everybody's talking about is, you know, which economy do we want to return to? Which parts of the economy as we know it do we actually want to keep focusing on? And I think I mean, if you look at airlines, for example, perhaps some of them will become more state-owned, and in which case perhaps the shift towards electrification might accelerate. But you've also seen a lot of investments into digital infrastructure. I mean, the question is whether will people now go back to physical meetings? Will people reduce their traveling? You know, how has this pandemic kind of changed the way we behave as well, you know, stop flying, traveling, etc. And at the same time, you know, during a lockdown, I think people appreciate green spaces and have seen the positive impacts of carbon emissions being reduced even more. So I think, you know, climate change is not going away. It will continue to be a driver as the world kind of begins to recover from this crisis. But of course, it's a negative in the short term if alternative costs for renewables is higher. But at the same time, I think you will see fewer investments into fossil fuels longer term, because it might not be the most fruitful investment. But I do think, really going back to the kind of battery storage and energy storage, I really think we need to, in order to accelerate it, we need to improve and kind of vastly increase the capacity to help this acceleration. But I'm a hopeless optimist, I guess. But I think as well, you know, nothing really makes things happen as fast as a crisis.
And again, you guys are taking the lead there. So you have Nordvolt, which is doing pretty well as well, and scaling up for Europe. Pretty much the only place where proper batteries are being manufactured now, and so quite interesting. And coming more to like the kind of COVID question of your portfolio context. So did that had a negative effect, or that was more balanced out? How did the entrepreneurs react? Was it a quick reaction, or you know, it was something completely taken by a mist and not obviously not expected, but like how did they handle it, and what do you think is going to be a long-term effect of that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, luckily a few of our portfolio companies raised new rounds just before Christmas, so they have a bit of a longer runway. But of course, some were positively impacted when it comes to affected when it comes to, for example, digital education and healthcare. Majority of them were not positively affected, because it becomes trickier, especially when you're trying to build your customer base, and when even the most stable big customers are struggling, then of course they might stop focusing on certain solutions, even if they're good and better in the longer term. What we did see was in the first few weeks, investors were more cautious. Some were pulling out of deals, so it was harder for the ones that were fundraising. I still think because VCs and funds already have the capital they need to invest, I wouldn't say that it stopped. It continued, but at a slower pace. So our advice to all of our portfolio companies was to try to increase your runway as much as you possibly can. I mean, reduce your burn. And I think we could really see there were some fantastic examples within our portfolio where we were amazed how quickly they managed, halve their burn rates. And a crisis like this is really, and I think that's important as well when you're looking at hardware investments and hardware companies, is, it's really all a matter of, you need to have a long runway and
it takes time to build things.
Yeah, reduce your burn rate, because I think that's the true risk. Really, is the burn rate, especially like this. And I think we're advising as well some of our companies that don't have such long runway. I mean, perhaps you need to start fundraising slightly earlier because it might take longer to get there. But so far, at least, touch wood, they will still very much up and running, but it's a tricky year for everyone.
No doubt. Of course, I think there's just no one untouched one way or the other, directly or indirectly, that there's an impact. So we usually have some time for questions, and I see a couple of questions that address for you, and one of them being, do you think Europe and US could take a leading position in batteries and EV someday? Do they stand a chance? And I think that's versus something that is obvious, China, right? And we briefly touched on Norrbold, which is predetermined. You have Volvo, which is also again quite advanced, to some extent, again very much related to Geely, which is a Chinese company. But what's your take on that? Just more broadly, what do you think personally? I think there's no right or wrong here. It's a guess at best.
Well, you're absolutely right that we have already taken the lead, for example, with Northvolt and a few other. I mean, we're in quite engineering heavy and industrial heavy countries. So I do think we have a quite stronghold there. But of course, I mean, China is always a threat, but at the same time, it's a huge market. It's a market that's growing rapidly. So I think it's more a matter of, as always, first mover advantage as well. But I think I don't know if we will win the market, but I think we'll have, at least in the near term, we have quite a strong, it can get a quite strong position. And I've seen as well quite a few really interesting, battery management software companies as well. So there's so many different aspects in that market. And of course, I believe that, with EV and autonomous, I'm hoping that that we can really get there and really scale up.
Another question, we frequently get this, whether you believe, what's your takeaways on hydrogen versus batteries? And there's a funny thing, Tesla yesterday became the most valuable automotive in the world. And the second one, Nikola, which is a truck company, which IPO'd recently without no revenues, just surpassed Ford. That says some quite interesting sides to where we're going, but what's your take on this hydrogen versus batteries? And do you guys are looking at this area specifically as well from as part of the fund? You mentioned obviously batteries, but hydrogen is
absolutely. It's a space. We've looked at this quite a lot, and also because trying to assess about what is the time frame for the hydrogen companies, and is it investable given our fund structure as well, which of course becomes a key question. But
by the way, I'd never asked, are you 5+, or you are longer maybe than that?
Yeah, 5 + 5 + 1 + 1, I think. But yeah, we are. I think. Personally, I think there will be space for both. I think there are different areas of application. It feels like the automotive industry has very much bet on, the more typical batteries, whereas I feel like, for example, in long haul trucking and other heavy duty industrial applications, I definitely think hydrogen could have an advantage. But right now, it feels like so much investment has gone into the infrastructure, and I feel like the automotive industry is such a huge driver of that. So I think we will see both, but and of course hydrogen is being, I mean, it has great, I definitely think I wouldn't dismiss hydrogen in any way. I think it will be incredibly important for the future, but it's taken a little bit longer, so I think we just need to be a bit patient there.
Yeah, definitely timing is something of one of the most crucial elements as part of when making an investment. Uh, so I always ask these two questions, which I think are very important. So if I'm an entrepreneur building a great impact company, how do I find you, Tove? And how do I approach you? What's the best way to reach you and your team?
Yeah. So you can email me directly. It's tove.rådelius@norskenvc.com. Or you have our website, of course, where you can always apply online. We do check every single application that comes through. So
That's a promise.
that's a promise. You will get a response from somebody with the same, I promise. Helpful if you attach a pitch deck and a bit more information. But in terms of kind of timing of when to reach out to us,
Yeah.
I mean, we typically like to see that there's an MVP and ideally some initial users or customers to demonstrate proof of concept. Doesn't necessarily need to equate to revenue, but it's helpful at least if you can see the kind of proof of concept and the initial traction.
Mm.
We do love to get in touch with companies, even if it's too early, and then follow the process. So even if it's a no for now, it might be a yes in a year or so. We actually,
Mm.
it's funny to bring up Enready again, but they were actually house members sitting here in our
Oh,
co
really?
I think we rejected them at first because we weren't focused on hardware, and then we shifted our
Mm.
investment thesis ourselves and invested at a later stage. And I think that's what is so important for entrepreneurs to remember is that even if you reach out at the wrong time, there might be a better timing down the way. So I definitely think it's worth getting in touch rather too early than too late.
Yeah. And sort of my next question is, what do you think? I think we're always comparing, when we think of in VC terms to US, right?
Mm.
And I mean, they're more advanced ecosystem, probably more money as well. But what do you wish for European entrepreneurs? What do you think is missing? What can be better? What do you wish in general for entrepreneurs, maybe to focus more on impact?
Mm.
What's your thoughts on that? This can be as wide as you can possibly imagine. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as wide as I can possibly imagine, I think one problem that we see a lot is the kind of valley of death, especially when it comes to clean tech companies or hardware capital intensive businesses. There's so many brilliant technologies being built. There's no lack of brilliant innovation and tech. It's just the difficult to obtain the funding required in these early stages, and then you have the financing opportunities once you're already a bit more mature. But that's, I feel like we need more. I would wish for more investors into the space, daring to take a gamble, even though I know that a lot of people might be a little bit hurt
mm,
from or fear of the kind of green and clean tech bubble. But also, if otherwise, more support from the states as well, because like I mentioned, green bonds and financing solutions are only available once companies are a little bit more mature. So
yeah.
that's something I would really wish for, is to see even more support for these really early stage companies, and also just love to see even more traditional capital and traditional institutional investors investing more into green tech and impact funds in general. And then I would wish for from founders and from companies to really think about what we spoke about in terms of your, is there a way of making your business model more kind of capital efficient?
Yeah.
Is there a way of reducing your burn rate and prolonging your runway? And because I think it's going to be even more important now, and something that I think investors are going to look at increasingly.
Mm. And I think you spoke about it a bit earlier on, and I think given that you're quite a new name in let's say in general in the space, maybe energy specifically, do you guys, you mentioned that 50% of the time you want to lead and 50% you want to co-invest, and you're happy to co-invest with any investor. Specifically, you tend, before in the history of the previous portfolio, invested more with Scandinavian investors. Just kind of couple of thoughts for people that we have a bunch of investors as part of
Mm.
the network, and probably also very, very interesting topic. And I know I met you guys through Agate, one of your team members, and we had some great discussions together. So
Yeah.
maybe some thoughts on that would to other investors that maybe, didn't know you guys. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we love to co-invest. We think it's great, and especially with investors that adds something different to the mix that we have
yeah,
a strong syndicate. So whether that's a, CVC or a investor that's very focused. I mean, ideally, especially if it's a very techy, I mean, deep tech, clean tech solution, it's fantastic to invest alongside somebody who has a little bit more of a niche.
yeah,
We can complement with our skill sets, but where we really, you get this optimal syndicate. So we love co-investing with other investors. I mean, the best deal flow that we can receive is also through other investors. So
mm,
yes, absolutely, just reach out. I mean, like I mentioned, our primary focus is in the Nordics, but we have a broader mandate as well when it's something that is incredibly exciting. So
amazing. So anyone, basically, entrepreneurs, investors, you know how to find Tove and Norrsken team. Thanks a lot, Tove, for today, your time, and really, really interesting insights. And again, congratulations on your recent fundraise. And I hope to see you in person soon. So there was a story I wanted to actually share. Why I was fascinated by Sweden, to be honest, was when we went. One of our teammates went to an event in Sweden, and we were looked through like a list of people that are participating in investment.
mm,
And I probably never seen in my whole life that so many people that had chief impact officer positions. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. This is real. And this is not something that will happen. This is happening, and it's happening at large. So really, congratulations on building this ecosystem just beyond capital, and like raising awareness. I think this is a great job you guys are doing, and I think it's going to be more data points for us to collaborate in this part of Europe. So
absolutely, and thank you for all these events. I mean, it's fantastic format as well. I really appreciate it. Really enjoy it.
hopefully we'll do this in person pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in, listening. You can reach Tove on Brella as well if you are building a great business. So definitely reach out. And again, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll be back with other sessions next week.
Thank you.